Leonard and Anne Mendel were a retired couple living peacefully in the North London suburb of Golders Green, United Kingdom. Leonard was 81 years at the time, while his wife, Anne, was 85 years old. 14th March 2005 started just like every other day for the retired couple, but little did they know that a young friend who wasn't so friendly anymore had terrible plans for them. Leonard had left home that day at 9:45 a.m. to pick up some plane tickets from the nearby travel agent's office. Leonard and Anne were planning to visit their daughter in Israel. He returned home at 11 a.m. and opened the door to a horrible sight that made his blood run cold. Leonard noticed that the walls of the hallway were covered in blood. At the bottom of the stairs was a pile of clothes. When he moved the clothes, he found his wife Anne lying underneath. Leonard wasn't sure if Anne was alive or dead. He didn't even notice the bloodstains on his wife's clothes. All he thought at the time was that his wife, being an elderly and frail woman, fell off the stairs. He had absolutely no idea how wrong he was. When his wife wasn't responding to his attempts to shake her into consciousness, he decided to call an ambulance. But his nightmare was far from over. What he discovered next sent chills down his spine. When Leonard reached for the phone in the hallway, he found out that the line had been deliberately cut. But luckily for him, the phone in the kitchen was still working, so he quickly dialed 999 and asked for an ambulance. While awaiting the arrival of the ambulance, Leonard gave his wife mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, hoping that it would somehow revive his unconscious wife. But sadly, it was to no avail. When the emergency response team arrived, they confirmed Anne Mendel dead. At 11:30 a.m., the police were called. When they arrived, the forensic team searched the crime scene for clues. They found out that the lock on the front door had not been forced. This suggested that Anne Mendel had known her attacker and had led them into her home. Anne Mendel's body was taken to Finchley Mortuary, North London, for a post-mortem. A forensic pathologist examined the body and found that the cause of death was stab wounds to the chest. Anne Mendel had been stabbed 14 times. But who would murder an 85-year-old woman, and what could have possibly been the motive behind the killing? Anne wasn't a rich woman, so she had no gold necklaces or diamond rings that were worth stealing. So why the gruesome attack? Well, the reason why Anne Mendel was killed will turn out to be more sickening than the actual crime itself. Before removing Anne's body from the murder scene, the forensic team working on the case had checked it for evidence. They hoped that the killer could be traced from their DNA. Unfortunately for them, just one scrap of DNA evidence was found in the crime scene, a small piece of skin under Anne Mendel's fingernail. This was the only evidence they needed to make a major breakthrough in the case. At least, that was what they thought at the time. But the attacker had no intention of making it easy for them, and this will be clear to you as the story unfolds. This evidence was then checked against a database of the DNA of known criminals. In a typical murder case, forensic scientists compare two samples of DNA, an evidence sample and a reference sample. In this case, the evidence sample was collected from Anne Mendel's hand. The reference samples were held on the DNA database. The forensic scientists found a match. The DNA evidence found on Anne Mendel belonged to a 17-year-old girl named Kemi Adeyoola. Kemi Adeyoola was born into a wealthy and prominent Nigerian family in the UK. Her father, Bola Adeyoola, was a Nigerian and a successful property tycoon with an estimated worth of around £10 million, while her mother, Mercuria, was from Barbados. Despite her affluent upbringing, Kemi had a troubled youth. Bola Adeyoola's marriage to Kemi's mother, Mercuria, lasted barely 4 years, and he had very little contact during the upbringing of his 3 children. Mercuria also had a 4th child, but from a different relationship. She and her children moved to a succession of homes in places including Cheltenham and Peterborough. These frequent relocations often led to strained relationships with neighbors. While staying in one specific property in Gloucestershire, Kemi reportedly killed the goldfish in a neighbor's pond and blamed it on a cat. She also briefly boarded at a £23,000 a year Wycliffe College. The independent school at Stonehouse prides itself on its academic and sporting achievements, but Kemi only lasted a few months because of a dispute over who was paying her fees. After the dispute, Mercurial moved her kids to Elmcroft Road in Golders Green, where they became neighbors to Mr. and Mrs. Mendel. The elderly couple had been married for 50 years and lived a quiet, rewarding life. They had 2 children and 14 grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Anne Mendel was always nice to Kemi, even though she was warned severally by other neighbors who experienced the dark side of Kemi Adeyoola. She would open the door to her house and let Kemi in each time she locked herself outside her home. Anne Mendel did this despite the fact that neighbors reported Kemi several times for subjecting other residents to a reign of terror. Kemi reportedly abused young children, harassed other neighbors due to their race, and even smeared excrement on their windows. A resident told the police that Kemi caused a lot of trouble to one particular Asian family in the area. She once lay in wait for the Asian man behind a bush and then punched him in the face, breaking his nose. She also racially abused the man's wife, but the last straw that broke the camel's back was when she tried to poison their dog as well. The family finally decided they had had enough and then reported her to the police, and she was arrested. Kemi started engaging in criminal activities at the age of 15. She was frequently shoplifting from stores and also became skilled at manipulating receipts to get refunds for stolen goods. These activities would eventually lead to a string of convictions and a custodial sentence. In September 2004, Kemi Adeyoola was sent to the Young Offenders Wing at Bullwood Hall Prison in Essex, where she served 3 months for shoplifting. The aim might have been for the system to make efforts to correct her bad behavior, but it turned out to have an opposite effect on her. Kemi's stay at Bullwood Hall gave her enough time to plan one of the darkest crimes ever committed by a woman in the UK. And just 4 months after her release in November 2004, she implemented every piece of the plan. On 12 May 2005, after the DNA evidence pointed to Kemi Adeyoola, she was arrested and interrogated for the murder of Anne Mendel. The police told her that she had been linked to the crime scene by forensic evidence. Kemi tried to explain why skin with her DNA had been found on Anne Mendel's fingernail. She stated that she had been in Golders Green the day before the murder, that she had visited Sally's Beauty Supply to buy 2 hair-relaxing chemical kits. Kemi revealed that she had met an old lady, Anne Mendel, between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. on Golders Green Road by the junction with Finchley Road, and that she held Anne Mendel's hand while she crossed the road. As they crossed, Anne slipped and scratched her hand, implying that the skin found on Anne's fingernail was a result of this event. However, Kemi changed her story several times, saying that this meeting had taken place on different days. The police suspected that she was lying because, first, Sally's Beauty Supply said they did not sell hair-relaxing chemicals to her. Secondly, a search of her flat showed she owned no hair-relaxing chemicals, just hair-straightening tongs. Thirdly, Anne Mendel's movement from the 12th and 13th March showed it was unlikely she would have been in Golders Green. And lastly, Kemi's mobile phone records showed that on the afternoon of 13th March, she was in the West End, a part of central London that is farther away from Golders Green. Kemi, feeling cornered at this point, decided to make her claims more believable by giving the police an alibi for the morning of the murder. She claimed that she had been at a bus garage in Alperton, northwest London. Kemi explained that she had been collecting a purse that she lost on a bus. However, records of calls made from her phone showed she had actually been near her home in Belsize Park, North London. This was a long way from Alperton, but just a short journey from Golders Green, where Anne Mendel was murdered. By this time, police had made more discoveries about Kemi Adeyoola's background. They found out that she had lived next door to Anne and Leonard Mendel in Golders Green before relocating to her new home in Belsize Park. The police then made another breakthrough that further gave them a clue about who and what they were dealing with. They discovered that while Kemi Adeyoola was in prison at Bullwood Hall, she had written a book about killing an elderly woman. The book was called Prison and After: Making Life Count. This murder manual was found during a routine cell search in October 2004. It was an 18-page, detailed plot describing how she planned to murder a defenseless elderly victim to make $3 million. In her murder manual, Kemi laid out her plans for the future. She described how she would buy a home through fraud and deception. She also explained how she would get a high-paying job by lying about her academic qualifications and forging official documents. The manual contained a shopping list, including butcher's knives, handcuffs, drugs, hoods, and stun guns. Adeyoola wrote about buying drugs to cause memory loss and paralysis in her victim. Her plan was to creep up on and attack an elderly, defenseless victim. Kemi Adeyoola described how she would torture her victim into revealing their private bank account numbers and the code to their private safe. She could then steal all their money and valuables. She imagined building a tent made of cling film to catch the victim's blood and also wrote about how she would dispose of the body. In her book, Kemi Adeyoola describes stalking an elderly woman in a wealthy area. She went into great details with lines such as run lightly and silently behind her and cover her mouth with a gloved hand and make her so scared she cooperates. Keep calm, composed, and silent. She must cooperate or take a knife to her throat. Tell her, this is your only warning. She also gave graphic details on how she will dismember and dispose of the body. She wrote, with your butcher's knife, remove her head, wrap it in film to contain bleeding, detach limbs one by one. When these writings were discovered, she told her psychiatrist and prison staff that her notes were part of the draft of a novel, and unfortunately, they believed her. The psychiatric assessment carried out after the document was discovered claimed that it did not indicate any concern that Ms. Adeyoola would be predisposed in any way to this type of violence, nor was there any evidence of this type of violence in her past. It described her as a highly intelligent and sophisticated young person who, with good support, should make a good recovery and engage in her A-level studies. Kemi had lied to the psychiatrist that she had achieved 4 grade A GCSE, which they believed, and said they felt it was a shame that she had been arrested. After Anne Mendel's murder, the police suspected that this document was no work of fiction, but a deadly serious plan for murder. However, it didn't make any sense because Anne Mendel was not wealthy. So why did Kemi Adeyoola target her? It was later argued that the murder of Anne Mendel was just a trial run. Kemi Adeyoola was testing her plan to see if it worked before going on to murder someone wealthy. Clearly, she expected to get away with this murder and go on to kill again. Kemi planned to wear gloves during the murder to hide her fingerprints. Detectives charged Kemi Adeyoola with the murder of Anne Mendel and held her on remand at Holloway Prison in North London. While she was awaiting trial, Kemi Adeyoola began to plot how she would create a fake alibi to prove she had not killed Anne Mendel. To pull this off, Kemi and her sister Sade placed an advert in the Brent Leader newspaper. The advert asked anyone who had seen Kemi Adeyoola on a bus on the morning of the murder to contact her solicitors. After this was done, Kemi then told Natasha Greenwood, a 16-year-old prisoner, to find a person outside the prison who they could pay to lie. This person would say they had seen Kemi Adeyoola on the 268 bus at the time of the murder. However, Kemi Adeyoola's plan to find a false alibi witness took an unexpected twist. Natasha Greenwood told the police about Kemi's plot and explained that she had pretended to go along with the plan just to keep Kemi Adeyoola calm. On June 6, 2006, Kemi Adeyoola's court case began. She denied murder and tried to influence the judge and jury by crying and shaking in court when she was questioned. On June 27, 2006, at the Old Bailey Court in London, Kemi Adeyoola, then aged 18, was found guilty of the murder of 85-year-old Anne Mendel. She was also found guilty of trying to deceive the court by plotting to invent a false alibi. Kemi Adeyoola was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years. However, in March 2024, she faced her first parole hearing. Surprisingly, for such a high-profile case, the parole board recommended moving her to open prison conditions after an October 2023 hearing. This would mean that Adeyoola could be transferred from a high-security prison to a less restrictive facility. In an open prison, inmates have more freedom of movement within the facility, and some might even be allowed to leave during the day for work or education, returning in the evening. It is a step between being fully locked up and being released back into society. It is designed to gradually reintroduce prisoners to more normal living conditions and test how they handle increased freedom. However, Adeyoola would still be serving her sentence just under less strict conditions and could be sent back to a closed prison if she doesn't follow the rules or if there are concerns about her behavior. The parole board emphasized that this was only a recommendation, not a decision for release. They stated that such recommendations are made only when the risk to the public has sufficiently reduced and when it's essential for informing future release decisions. The board stressed that their focus is solely on assessing the prisoner's current risks to public safety. Despite having the power to block this move, the Justice Secretary did not oppose the recommendation. Once again, it's important to note that prisoners in open conditions can be returned to closed prisons if concerns arise about their behavior. This development represents a significant step in Adeyoola's case, potentially paving the way for her eventual release, though she remains in custody for now. Over to you now. Do you think it would be wise to release Kemi Adeyoola back into society? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Also, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more true crime stories. Thank you for watching and stay safe.